Shabbat Shalom. I just want to welcome everyone to the Sabbath Day conference call. And this is Barbara serving as your host today. And Brother Pete is here as your co-host.
So glad to have you all come and join us this day.
Okay, and we're glad to be here. And the title here is, Who is the Grim Reaper? Have you ever thought about it? Well, is it Saturn? Is it Old Father Time? Is it Satyr Day? Do all these things link together? Well, in this time we live in, it's been a year ago since the Grim Reaper showed up at King Charles's coronation, and there was one moment from the ceremony that caught people's attention. Onlookers are convinced they spotted the Grim Reaper at Westminster Abbey as guests started arriving to this historic event. And everybody was talking about it. It was on Twitter and Newsweek. It was everywhere. And they tried to come up with explanations. And some said it was Photoshop. But no, it was not Photoshopped. It was actually there. And the Grim Reaper showing up just outside the door of the entrance to the Abbey couldn't have happened accidentally. They had all kinds of security there. There are three possibilities, but regardless of which possibility is true, the whole world immediately thought the Grim Reaper. When they saw that image of that man walking across, they thought Grim Reaper. So the symbolism that everybody thought they saw was the angel of death. And so today we're going to talk about who is the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper is also another name for Saturn. I have to move the screen. The Grim Reaper is typically seen only around Halloween. He's widely understood as a symbol of death itself. Very few, if any, in modern society have recognized in either the Grim Reaper or Old Father Time the pagan connection to the cruelest, most evil of all the gods. However, an ancient would immediately recognize both as being none other than Saturn. I have to move my screen. Because the emblems which identified Saturn are the same which identify Old Father Time and the Grim Reaper, size and something to mark the passage of time. Saturn was associated with the Grim Reaper. In ancient times, Saturn was associated with the Grim Reaper, and because of the revolution of Saturn through the zodiac, was roughly equal to the average human lifespan. For example, if someone was born when Saturn was in Aquarius, they were considered to be living on borrowed time until Saturn returned to that constellation. And Saturn was also associated with time and was often depicted with a scythe or sickle. The Romans associated Saturn with the Greek god Kronos, who also had a sickle, and Saturn was often depicted as an old man with a crutch.
Image, Father Time's origins are curious. The ancient Greeks themselves began to associate Kronos, their word for time, with the god Kronos, who had the attributes of a harvester's sickle. The Romans equated Kronos with Saturn, who also had a sickle and was treated as an old man, often with a crutch. The wings and hourglass were early Renaissance additions, and he eventually became a companion of the Grim Reaper, the personification of death, often taking his scythe. He may have as an attribute a snake with its tail in its mouth, the ancient Egyptian symbol of eternity.
Okay, so Saturn was associated with the Grim Reaper and Father Time. Well, this is showing you about Father Time. And a far more chilling representation of Father Time with Baby New Year can be found in this illustration from the 19th century. Father Time, or Saturn, as the god of time, is standing in front of a large clock holding a scythe. The old years are 1887, 1888, and they're passing away as full-grown bodies wrapped in burial shrouds. The new year, 1889, is coming in as a young child. While the picture is quite dark, light from the fire is lighting the little boy, while on either side are swirls of smoke from the burning fire at his feet. Notice that the new years still to come, 1891, 1892, are portrayed as child sacrifice victims, all of whom are heavily veiled. All of the grotesque elements of this hideous god are contained in this one innocent illustration. So who is Saturn?
Under different names, Nimrod's Saturn appear in all ancient idolatry. He was Kronos, or Kronos, for the Greeks. For the Egyptians, he was alternately Kronos or Orsis. To the Assyrians, he was Baal, or Belus. The Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and Canaanites referred to Saturn as Baal. For the Romans, he was Saturn. The ancient people would recognize Saturn is also the Grim Reaper.
Here are some pictures. Saturn, the god of time, Baal, the sun god, Grim Reaper, and Nimrod. They're all related. They're all the same god. Nimrod equals Baal, Baal equals Saturn, and Saturn equals the Grim Reaper. So Chion is the Hebrew word for Saturn. And Amos speaks of a day where Israel worships a star god that they would make for themselves. Israel would have been an apostasy then, of course, and that's from Amos 5:26. But you have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch king, and Chion your images, the star of your god, which you made for yourselves. And then in Stevens in Acts 7 quotes Amos. It is translated Chion is Remphan, which is Greek for Saturn. So we know that, I have to move this, Saturn worship is the oldest form of Satanism and is clearly and historically linked to Satyr, the horned goat.
Saturn. Now the name Saturn in Chaldee is pronounced Satyr, but as every Chaldee scholar knows, consistent only of 4 letters, thus S-T-U-R. This name contains exactly apocalyptic number 666. Here we see that S is 60, T 400, U 6, and R 200, adding to 666.
Okay, so this has just happened in May of 2024. This is the first official portrait of Charles as king. He commissioned it, and it's not like he didn't know what was in it. The whole world has been shocked after seeing this image. Every person who has seen that image came away thinking, that looks demonic, satanic, or occult. Because it looks so evil, people started to dig into the portrait. And he looks like a rotting human corpse that's still alive. His color is pale green-gray. Is he portraying that he is the ruler of hell with a fiery red background that looks like hell surrounding him? Ghoulish, animalistic heads seem to be littered throughout the image, even witches. So Saturn is right there, Satan is right there in the center of that mirrored image of that painting of the King, Charles. So this happens often in art. If they mirror things to see the message in there, and it is upside down mirrored. And Satan is obviously in that portrait at multiple points, and this is shown side by side. It's very obvious. There are many other things in that image that all-seeing eyes there also. And here it is side by side. And you can go watch this YouTube where Tim Cohen explains a lot about the symbols with King Charles, and before that, Prince Charles. So Saturn worship is the oldest form of Satanism and is clearly and historically linked to Satyr, the horned goat.
Saturn and the Satyr are both linked to the same false system of worship. Isaiah 13:21 says, "But wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their forces shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and Satyrs shall dance there." Isaiah 34:14 says, "The wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the island, and the Satyr shall cry to his fellow. The screech owl also shall rest there, and find for herself a place of rest." In both cases, the Hebrew word translated as Satyr is Strong's 8163.
Okay, so indeed, Israel worshipped on Satyr Day. It would seem that the Father stopped Israel's Satyr Day observance early on, speaking to Israel after their deliverance from Egypt. Yahweh said in Leviticus 17:7, "And they shall no more offer their sacrifices unto devils, after whom they have gone a-whoring. This shall be a statute forever unto them throughout their generations." Notice the word for devils below, and you'll see there it's highlighted, and it's 8163. So skipping down to the bottom, the devils and Satyrs are the same Hebrew word, H8163, Satyrs.
Why spell it Satyr Day instead of Saturn's Day? Because Saturn and Satyr are both linked to the same false system of worship. Very cleverly, the adversary receives his worship every week, all year long, by sincere folks who believe they are following Yahweh. This is a dual counterfeit. One is obvious, the other not so obvious. Saturn worship is the oldest form of Saturnism and is clearly and historically linked to Satyr, the horned goat. The adversary does not care how you spell his many different names or under which one you worship.
So Satan, or Pan, is also called the horned god. Pan, a lusty satyr, half man, half goat, was given to every form of licentiousness and debauchery. Kronos, over here on the right, the father of the gods, for a certain wicked deed, was called Titan and cast down to hell. Kronos is none other than Satan himself. Titan, or Titan, as it is sometimes spelled, is the Chaldee form of the Hebrew word Shaitan, or Satan, the common name for the adversary. In the region where the Chaldean mysteries were originally concocted, that adversary, who was ultimately the real father of all the pagan gods, and who, to make the title of Kronos, Saturn, the Horned One. His title is Saturn and the Horned One. So the naming of Saturday. Saturday is named after a Roman god and planet. Saturday is the only day of the week that retains its Roman origin in English. Nimrod is the same as Saturn. The god of time is the Roman god Saturn, Kronos. The remains of the temple of Saturn is still in Rome. Maybe if you ever go over there, you can see the remains of their temple to the god Saturn. The city of Saturn is Rome. Did you know Rome used to be called the city of Saturn? Of course, there's a Roman celebration called Saturnalia that is held in December. So Saturday is Saturn's day. Okay, more about why did Constantine outlaw the biblical calendar, and the decrees in Nicaea legislated into place an entire counterfeit system of religion with the pagan solar calendar. So Satyr Day was not the seventh day of the week until 321 AD, when Rome adopted the pagan seven-day planetary week. Satyr Day was the first day of the seven-day week for its entire history during the time that the scripture was being written, and it was not promoted until Constantine venerated the day of the sun, supplanting Satyr Day as the first day of the week. So Saturday is only the seventh day of the week by virtue of Emperor Constantine in 321 AD. He venerated the day of the sun, which moves Saturday from its coveted position as the first day of the week to the seventh day of the week. And so here you can see how it originally looked. Saturn Day as day 1, Sunday was day 2, on down through the 7. Then Constantine changed it, put Sunday first and Saturday as day 7, so there would be a seventh day for the Jews to worship on.
The Sabbath question is to be the issue in the great final conflict in which all the world will act a part. Men have honored Satan's principles above the principles that rule in the heavens. They have accepted the spurious Sabbath, which Satan has exalted as the sign of his authority. But God has set his seal upon his royal requirement. Each Sabbath institution bears the name of its author, Mark, that shows the authority of each. It is our work to lead the people to understand this. God has called us to uplift the standard of his downtrodden Sabbath. How important then that our example is Sabbath keeping should be right. Testimonies to the Church. Volume 6, page 352 to 353.
I'll leave all these links below of all these these quotations, and for you to look for yourself. So, okay, well, what is a spurious Sabbath? A spurious Sabbath is a false Sabbath that has been set up by an apostate or someone who has turned away from God. The term is used to describe the act of replacing the Sabbath with a day that is not a sign between God and his people, and leading people to worship on that day instead. So can you prove that Saturday is the Sabbath? Answer these two questions. Where does it say in Scripture that Saturday is the Sabbath? Where does it say in Scripture that the Sabbath is every seventh day in succession? Well, you will find the answer is you cannot find it. So an ancient proverb claimed, "He who controls the calendar controls the world." Is the world honoring false gods and false days of worship? And remember, Revelation 18:4 says, "Come out of her, my people, that you receive not of her plagues and partake not in her sins." So to access more information about the true calendar and the false calendar, please go to our website, LunarSabbathDay.com. And thank you for being here today.